This afternoon, you're listening to the Todd LaBorwit Show, Real Estate Radio and Salem Broadcast Network, WRC 1260 AM, and I'm your host, Todd LaBorwit, and this segment is brought to you by Topaz Mortgage, our preferred partner for mortgage brokering. And in the studio with us now is Jody Kline. He's a zoning attorney with Miller and Canby over here in Rockville, Maryland. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me.
You're a very informative guy. And starting off, let's say this, zoning is a very big topic, and things are happening all around us. We have Tyson's Corner that looks like it's in the Jetsons, getting in and out. And then you have Rockville, it's starting to be built up. It's almost like Washington, D.C. City is expanding up that Rockville Pike. Can you give us a little bit of inside information or what's going on?
Well, it's very perceptive because, in fact, the Rockville Pike corridor is considered an extension of the District of Columbia. And there's been a recent phenomenon discussion of how we can rename White Flint to something that's current, a la something like Noma downtown, or pick from some of the examples that have been taken downtown. Now, it's been a lot of jokes. Most of the ones that have come out have been more of gridlock variations on that with Rockville Pike. But the Rockville Pike corridor is a main corridor in the county, and it basically is getting most of the attention in the county. And with places like White Flint, and we're here in Bethesda today. Bethesda is redoing its master plan to try and basically refine what's happened here. Bethesda has always been the crown jewel of Montgomery County, and it's going to get another look because it's going to continue to be the economic generator for the county. So zoning is pervasive in the county. It's basically in everything that you see or do. And
now with zoning, it's basically zoning by definition. Not the true definition, but for our listeners, the definition of zoning is making sure that a town works. You can't just build something, have like 500 employees start driving to an area and have like a one-lane road.
Mm-hmm.
It's all got to be completely thought out about how everything's going to work, the infrastructure as far as do we need the metro stuff. Like, is that how, am I on the right bounds?
Well, I would take this from zoning is supposed to set things up. Zoning is really nothing more than a book of rules and regulations to tell you how things should be developed. And if you do it that way, it should work out. It doesn't necessarily it's not a self-fulfilling prophecy because there's a lot of variations, or some of the assumptions don't actually plan out or play out the way they had originally thought. So zoning basically gives you the framework to end up with that ultimate state, but there's a lot of variation that keeps that ultimate state from happening.
Are there different zoning committees for different towns, or is it for the county, or is it different zonings? For how are they broken up?
Good question. I mean, I'll use Montgomery County as the example. Montgomery County is a county in and of itself. Within that, there are incorporated municipalities, the two largest ones being Rockville and Gaithersburg, which have their own zoning authority independent from Montgomery County. But most of the places that you hear about, you'll be talking about Kensington today. Kensington is a municipality, but it is not totally outside of the Montgomery County zoning system. So generally, probably, I guess maybe 80 to 85% of the county is covered by the county zoning ordinance, which dictates most of what land use decisions are made. We're in Bethesda today. We're in the county zoning jurisdiction.
Now, let me ask you a question. Once a project is done, and then 30 years down the road, there's a problem. Let me give you an example. Town of Rockville is building all these, like Rockville Town Center. They're building the hotel.
Right.
Everything's going up. It's getting stronger and more powerful. But for me, like I have a daughter and I have a stroller, and I have to walk because I live in Rockville Town Center. I walk over to the bank, and there's the get across the street is next to impossible. There's no ramps. The light doesn't turn. So many people could get hit. Like, is that a zoning thing that someone would put forth to have changed, or
it's zoning in the largest context, which actually involves master planning and involves subdivision of land and platting of land. But in the general understanding, everybody would call that zoning. You shouldn't be seeing that in Rockville because it's actually all pretty new generation stuff, and most of that was contemplated. If you went down to Pook's Hill, for instance, and lived up on Pook's Hill and tried to walk to the metro station to Grosvenor, you'd not be able to find a sidewalk to walk on. That's the old state of development. Rockville should be a better example of where the new development have pedestrian accessibility to the things that you need, like the services, Dawson's grocery store, or the metro station. And if you're not having that, then that's because Rockville hasn't completely built out. And as you point out, there are still things going on in the core there, and maybe it'll all mature when that gets finished.
Amazing. So it's really your zoning committee can make or break your town.
Yeah, well, they all want to make a good town. Sometimes their expectations don't get fulfilled, whether they have shortcomings or whether the developer doesn't perform the way they expected. That sort of varies by situation.
We should have those people run for Congress. Maybe everything would kind of run more in a better system.
Well, there's a whole books done with basically cartoons of planning commissions sitting there trying to make decisions with humorous anecdotes associated with it. It's a tough decision-making process.
How did you get into this field?
Well, the law firm I joined basically had always been very actively involved in real estate. And I apprenticed under a gentleman who had a growing zoning practice. And in this county, because things are so sophisticated in the way we do things, you can actually work on nothing more than getting gas stations approved or apartment buildings approved and make a living doing it. So I just gravitated into that line of work.
And you work for the companies that are looking to make a difference.
We represent everybody from international corporations to churches to citizens groups, depending on what the subject is.
Wow. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. I mean, and I used the term earlier. Zoning is pervasive. I was trying to think, if you wondered why I'm parking in the back of the building where we're meeting today and there's no parking, well, zoning told the builder of this building where he had to put his parking, and it dictated kind of where you ended up going when you came here.
Is there any corruption, you think, in zoning? Like I know in PG County people got in trouble.
Yeah, well, I have a grin on my face because I can say unequivocally that Montgomery County is probably the cleanest county that I've ever heard of. There is absolutely no graft. No, there probably to the general populace, there maybe someone like myself has a closer affinity or maybe an inordinate amount of influence over decision makers. I don't find that to be true. I think citizens in Montgomery County have a very strong vote and voice in the process. But for just being clean and graft free, absolutely.
Let me put you on the spot a little bit. So I've heard from people in Rockville that they're trying to put a big restaurant in there. There's like a space for a big restaurant. And one side is telling me that because there's not enough parking in Rockville, these big chains don't want to take that big space. And then another side that I hear, not saying names, is saying that, oh, those commercial brokers don't know how to sell a spot. So which side do you think it is?
I am aware that there are issues about parking in Rockville. I would have thought, given that it's a urban setting, that there would have been enough parking there. I understand that the charging for the parking has a detrimental influence on the people coming to it. But I would say that the location of the building and its accessibility, or let's say as a destination restaurant, drives the resistance to leasing it more than anything else. I'm not quite sure I know where the location is you're talking about.
It's right there across 51 Monroe. There's a new building right down the street.
Sure.
The Choice Hotels has their.
Yeah,
it's that
right.
building. There's a big unit
on the ground floor, probably.
Right.
Okay,
and it's huge. You could put a Houston. I would love a Houston in there.
Right. I've looked at plenty of locations over my lifetime where I said, what a perfect place for Clyde's. Got one in mind that I think overlooks a lake, would be gorgeous, just like Tower Lodge or something like that. But Clyde's is, the market's not there. It's just not there.
Right.
And it's not easy to drive to Rockville Town Center. If you want to ride the subway, you're in great shape, but you don't get there by driving very easily. So those are impediments to getting that large-scale white tablecloth restaurant.
Wow, you're a wealth of information. By the way, if you're tuning in, I have with me Jody Kline with Miller & Canby. He's a zoning attorney. I'm your host, Todd LaBorwit, and you're listening to Salem Broadcast Network, WRC 1260 AM. Now, Jody, let's talk about the commercial real estate sector in Montgomery County. There's a high level of vacancies of businesses. What's your take on that?
Well, that's absolutely true. I don't know the exact percentage, but Mostly because of the General Services Administration contraction of its leasing programs, and then the consulting industry that supports the federal government. There's just not as great a demand for office space in Montgomery County. The county's aware of it, but it is coming up in basically planning decisions that are being made today. In the marketplace, you see a shift more into the multifamily from offices. A site that would be eligible for both is being looked at more for multifamily because that's got some traction in the marketplace today. And then within the last year, the county went up and redid its Clarksburg master plan and eliminated a recommendation for a lot of office development or substituted for another use simply because they knew nobody would ever go that far up the I-270 corridor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So those factors are coming into play. We hear that it will come back someday, but there's certainly a lot of retrenchment, and it has an effect on, one, what the leasing rates are and how land is actually being built out.
Now, Jody, you're a wealth of information. And it's almost like this information you would get from like an editor of like a newspaper or like a journalist. But you are a zoning attorney. Who are your clients? What's your ideal client? Like, how do you do your day-to-day operations other than having? I mean,
sure. Well, let me kind of answer the question this way. The reason I can talk about this is land use attorneys, zoning attorneys have to be kind of familiar with everything that's going on. We're not classic attorneys, the guys who go to court every day. We need to kind of know where the public sector is and where the private sector is to be able to get them together. So our clients basically run all the way from international corporations, Exxon Corporation, McDonald's Corporation, over the years, all the way down to something very local, depending on whatever is their issue. In the vein of what we were just talking about in the office market, we probably right now have more multifamily developer clients we've had in a long time, simply because that's what the market is. That's basically a place where there's demand for a service and there's no office use, so people are looking how to convert either approvals that they had, which we've had a couple of those recently in Silver Spring, approved as office buildings, came back, got them reapproved as apartment buildings. And that's a phenomenon that's going to go on for the foreseeable future.
So for our listeners, someone that wants to do some type of zoning, like what's like a small to medium size project that they would be looking into?
Well,
if they had to call you.
Yeah, well, depending on who your listeners are, I mean, it can run all the way from wanting to add a bay window to your kitchen, and you need a variance to do that.
Do they call you?
Oh, yeah. The system in Montgomery County is sophisticated enough that it's difficult to go through and get the approvals without having a lawyer along with you, which is too bad. I mean, it shouldn't be that difficult, but in fact, it is that way. But from there, maybe you live on a 5-acre parcel of land over in Quince Orchard or something, but your zoning is half-acre. Well, that theoretically means you could have 10 lots on your property. You decided you want to basically retire and go live somewhere else. You'd come to us and an engineer or other professionals that would help you put a package together to get your property subdivided. So it runs all the way from that all the way to a 20-story office building in Bethesda.
Perfect. Well, what I'd like to offer you, our listeners, if you want to get in touch with Jody Kline and talk about your zoning issues, please call me at 301-467-8444. That number again is 301-467-8444.